there's three principles of German foreign policy that never again, never alone, and politics before force.
Ursula Stark, German political scientist and blogger, lived in Ukraine from 2018 until 2020. With over 1 million refugees from Ukraine officially in Germany, and Germany playing a pivotal role in allowing German-made tanks to be used in Ukraine, German politics are closely tied to discussions of Ukraine. Although Germany, depending on how aid is defined, is number 2 or 3 in terms of assistance to support Ukraine, the country's public political response to the war has not always been agile or what you could call good PR. In January 2023, a controversial left-wing politician, Sahra Wagenknecht, and a well-known second-wave feminist, Schwarzer, wrote something called the Manifesto for Peace. The word choices in the document were kind of rough. And later, in interviews on political talk shows in Germany, there was an alarming both-sidism, and there was also a downplaying of the rape of Ukrainian women. Let's talk with Ursula, who followed these developments closely, to help us understand what's going on in Germany. Ursula, let's start with who Sahra Wagenknecht is and how relevant she is to Germany's policy towards Ukraine.
Yeah, well, actually, I would say she's not really that relevant to German policy towards Ukraine at all, at least not the official German foreign policy towards Ukraine. Let's talk about who she is. Well, she's an icon of the far left in Germany. If you notice her appearance, she even dresses like Rosa Luxemburg, right? So she's a well-known figure, but she's also a controversial one, also within the left. I mean, she grew up in the GDR, and she's a very famous member of what was called the Communist Platform within the left party. So that's like the part of the German left party that's very far left, and they advance like this kind of orthodox Marxist ideology. Just one anecdote that says it all is if you ask her what she did when the Berlin Wall came down, she always tells the story that she retreated to her study to read Hegel, right? Which is unbelievably pretentious, but also it tells you a lot about her ideology, right? That she was, well, a socialist and also someone who was feeling quite comfortable in the GDR. So when the Berlin Wall came down and the GDR ceased to exist, for her, it was the end of the world, basically, a little bit. So yeah, she's one of the main figures in the far German left, but she's not at all representing a majority in the German public at all.
Schwarzer, she's a well-known feminist figure in Germany. And from the view of structural inequality that feminism has always fought and like power disparities in international relations, were you surprised that a feminist would put Ukraine and Russia on the same level considering negotiations?
It is surprising if you think of her just as a feminist, but if you know her within the feminist discourse, it's not that surprising, actually, because Alice Schwarzer, I mean, her merits in the advancement of feminism in Germany are undisputed, right? But she has also been a controversial figure in German feminist thought. After 9/11, especially, she took this very strong anti-Islam stance. She would talk about a creeping Islamization in Europe, all of that. So her thought went into this really conservative kind of rail in feminist thought. She's also been criticized for being a TERF, a trans-exclusionary radical feminist. She's always published pieces in which she advances a very radical and also a very conservative version of feminism. And also I wouldn't say that she's pro-Russian per se, but she's always been very apologetic of Russian foreign policy, right? I mean, after the annexation of Crimea, she would give interviews saying that it's understandable, NATO imperialism, things like that. And she also published pieces by key Russian propagandists. In 2018, there was this article by Margarita Simonyan in her magazine Emma, which is an unbelievable piece. Really, it's mainly Russian propaganda. It's anti-Western imperialism and all of that. And the piece is called "We're Not Like You." So it's in a way a clash of ideologies, of ways to see the world, and she's given those people a voice since 2018. So it's not that surprising, really, if you know her story.
You've talked about how Wagenknecht did not exactly experience joy when the Berlin Wall fell. You've talked about how Schwarzer is an apologist in some ways for Russia. What parts of German society do they represent?
Good question. Very good question. Well, for starters, it's important to point out that the vast majority of Germans support weapon shipments to Ukraine and support a pro-Ukrainian position. However, I think around like 20 or 30% of the German public that are very skeptical towards weapons shipment to Ukraine. One has to see, well, the parts that usually are skeptical Germans in Eastern Germany. It's very important to understand the socialization of people in Eastern Germany for this. Two things. First, the term peace. I mean, these people were socialized with Soviet propaganda, right? And the term peace, in that, it was central to Soviet propaganda. And that term meant mainly to sort of fulfill this socialist promise of world peace by siding with your brothers in socialism. And that was the USSR. And for people today, they equate that with Russia. It's like, this is how we achieve peace in Europe, is by engaging Russia, right? So this is something that is very prevalent. And also, people in the East, not just in the East, but especially in the East, still have this kind of Cold War mindset, right? That world politics is mainly like great powers that have spheres of influence, and it's okay for them to act in a hostile way if this sphere of influence is violated, right? That this is okay. This notion is very, very prevalent in Eastern Germany. And she's always exactly that. Like, this war is a geostrategic one, not an imperialist one. So this Cold War mindset sort of plays into that, I would say. But mainly, you have to understand, like, the Germany was divided by the Iron Curtain, but it was not just a physical barrier. It was also a cultural one, right? I mean, we were alienated from the peoples of Central Eastern Europe. We didn't know what was going on there. For us, that was Ostblock, this one block that was more or less the same. I grew up in Central Germany, along what was called the Fulda Gap. That was the supposed route of a Soviet attack on Germany. So for us, basically, everything beyond Fulda was Russian. It sounds funny, but it's true, because we just lack empathy for the historical experience of the societies in Central Eastern Europe. And that plays into that as well.
That's a really interesting point. Now, you talked a little bit about demographics in terms of geography. Is there an age demographic that goes along with this idea that weapons mean war?
I do think there is, because, well, this Cold War mindset I was talking about is especially prevalent with the older generations, right? I mean, I would say, like, our generation is the last one that experienced it. Today it's different. People have different mindsets. They didn't even live through German partition, right? So I would say yes, there is. It's especially the older generations and geographically the eastern parts of Germany.
Can you briefly explain about Germany's special connection to pacifism and why Germans were very cautious? And it was used as one of the reasons that Olaf Scholz, Germany's chancellor, was so reluctant to give the green light to send the tanks into Ukraine.
Absolutely, that's so important. Pacifism has a strong tradition in Germany. Well, due to its historical experience, of course. I think we started 2 world wars, didn't go so well. So the notion that Germany should never again be instrumental in starting a war of aggression is very, very, very strong. It is even a part of our constitution. So it's unconstitutional to engage in a war of aggression. And there's also this quote from Willy Brandt: "Von deutschen Boden darf nie wieder Krieg ausgehen," which means there will never again originate war from German soil. It's a very strong cultural motive in Germany. And I taught German foreign policy for quite a while, and there's 3 principles of German foreign policy that I've always taught my students, and they're never again, never alone, and politics before force, which means that due to our historical experience, there is a huge, enormous reluctance to the use of force in international relations. And it also makes, I think this is what makes German foreign policy frustratingly slow, because it's not just that we are reluctant to the use of force. Every action in Germany, or every foreign policy action in Germany, needs to be coordinated with our allies. And it needs to be like this never alone principle, right? It needs to be embedded in multilateral contexts, be it Europe, be it NATO, or our allies, right? So this makes it really slow and at times frustrating, right? Because you think, wow, these Germans, they need to lead, they need to step up their game, right? I mean, this is a huge war that endangers all of our security structures in the world and in Europe. How come you cannot lead in that context? But in my view, it has to do with that cultural side of foreign policy, of being reluctant and also having the need to coordinate.
What is it in German culture that is making the German government so slow to embrace how it communicates positive things with people? There's been an air defense system from Rheinmetall, Skynex, that is really one of the leading developments in keeping drones out of cities. And that's been sent to Ukraine, paid for by the German government, but you can hardly find any information about it. And that would be something that Germany should be talking about. But Germany makes mistakes and doesn't apologize. Germany does great things and keeps it secret. Is this a German stubbornness?
Good question. Unfortunately, I have no good answer to that, because it's the same question that I ask myself. So how come you're so bad at communicating what Germany is all about, right? And also the Leopard tank question was really not a good piece of work of communication, right? I can only think of one reason, and that's insecurity. I would say that German policymakers are scared of making mistakes because they will get a lot of backlash, from the public. So they're really cautious and discuss everything like 5 or 6 times not to make mistakes. It's the only explanation I have, unfortunately. Wagenknecht, she refers to that cultural meme, right, of German pacifism. But there was this piece by Herfried Münkler, one of the most prominent political theorists of Germany, that he said what Wagenknecht and Schwarzer say has nothing to do with the political tradition of pacifism, really. If you look at pacifism as a political movement in Germany, it originated in the close before the First World War, and the main aim of it was the ban of the war of aggression. Like, traditional historical pacifists would never suggest that a victim of aggression has not a right to self-defense. That's not in line at all with the main aims of historical pacifism. So I would say what Wagenknecht and Schwarzer do is like this populist hijacking of cultural meaning.
Like cherry picking.
The cherry picking, but also like hijacking this meaning and suggesting it means this and that we cannot endorse weapon shipments. But
how these things tie also into a little bit of hybrid warfare. There's the meaning of a lot of things are being perverted, and this actually allows us to jump right back to how Wagenknecht was acting on German TV. She was trying to downplay certain things and not acknowledge things like the systematic rape of Ukrainian women. And on a particular German talk show, the show's moderator who stepped in and called her out for being misleading or even untruthful. And hybrid war is a topic that people in Ukraine and Eastern Europe seem to know more about than the Germans are willing to acknowledge. Have you been watching the effects of hybrid warfare and how it makes journalism a little bit more difficult in Germany?
Definitely, yes. And especially that this show you're talking about with Wagenknecht, it was widely discussed in German public as an example of the dangers of disinformation on the public discourse. I mean, Wagenknecht, you really need to watch her techniques of disinformation, right? She just puts this huge load of disinformation, and you just end up debunking the worst ones. But many disinformation pieces just go through, right? Because you just cannot possibly debunk every single claim she makes, right? So this has been a huge discussion on why on earth should we invite someone as Wagenknecht that does not, as we said, represent large parts of the German public to talk shows like this frequently? There's no reason for that, and it poses a real danger, right?
I was almost under the impression that they were prepared for
Das kann
her
ich in dieser
because
Sendung
they
so
did
nicht stehen lassen.
have
Ich zeig dir
things
mal, was die
prepared to
UN
counter
sagt.
her. I mean, it's not every day that a moderator can say, no, we have this clip that disputes what you say. So it seems like there is a little bit of proactive journalism, but at the same time, part of hybrid war and the break. As someone who knows Ukraine, what ideas in Germany about Ukraine and Russia are tied to outdated stereotypes and false narratives?
Right. Well, the first one I would say is what we've already touched on, is this equation of Russia and the Soviet Union, um, especially in the East, because we think like what Eastern Germans say a lot is, come on, Ukraine, we were under Russian occupation for decades. Cannot possibly be that bad, right? So it's this, but the German occupation by Russians is a different thing, right? I mean, it was the Soviet Union, it was the Red Army, and most of these people usually, or maybe, were Ukrainians, right? So the difference of this is something that's, again, given our historical experience, not very, very clear. So people tend to equate Russia and the USSR because of this cultural alienation we talked about earlier, I would say. Also, this narrative of Russia and Ukraine as being historically one people, that is also something that is very popular, especially in Eastern Germany, because people, again, because of this cultural alienation, do not have a lot of knowledge about Ukraine at all. So that was one of the things I thought were the most interesting ones. Moving to Ukraine is getting to know that country that was basically blank for me. I had no idea because, as I said, I lived in Western Germany, and getting to know the particularities of that society was fascinating. But I would say large parts of Germans do not know that at all.
The Oscars just happened. The Navalny documentary won an Oscar.
Well, the problem with Navalny is, I think, and that comes with many figures in Eastern Europe that sort of put this anti-corruption agenda forward, is that their agenda is very one-sided. It's about anti-corruption, and you don't know a lot about your political views, really. I mean, it was similar with Zelensky when he was elected, right? No one really knew. Many people thought he would be like pro-Russian. He would sell out the country to the Russians, which did not happen. But still, it's like a question mark, and you don't really know that. And especially, and people, yeah, as you said, don't know the positions that Navalny has taken in the past. Now, he's, from what I know, has corrected his views in many ways, that especially regarding the annexation of Crimea. But still, it's like a blank. It's a political blank. You don't know what you get, really. I mean, it's an anti-Putin, and that's basically it. But that's not enough for politics, right? You need to know what your stances are on several issues, and we just don't know, right? Or the things we know are more or less outdated. So there's a new situation right now. So I'm not sure, really. I wouldn't celebrate him as a leader, but I mean, it shows the level of desperation that we sort of clutch to every straw we have, and Navalny is the only straw we have, right? So that's
Ursula Stark, political scientist and political blogger. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Carrie. My pleasure.
Political science can help you understand the world better. Subscribe to my channel and feel better informed.